All right, and we're on to Hive 2. As you can see, this setup is a little more complex. These guys have expanded extremely quickly. So we started off with the one box. They filled that to 80%. So I put a second brood super on there. And at that point, I put what we call a queen excluder. The queen's too big to fit through this grate here. So anything above that, only the worker bees can reach. So we'll get honey frames that have no brood in them. So I'm gonna open up here. As you can see, I've put my gear on. These guys are a little more lively than my other hive. I also found my hive tool, which makes it a little easier to clean up some of those wax issues in there. I'm going to be interested to see. We have bees up here, which is good. The last spot check I did, there's not really any wax. Well, they're starting to touch it a little bit. They're starting to pin things down. But not really any wax, not really, certainly not any honey yet. But this is going to be the frame where the magic happens. So we're going to set this aside. So this right here is the queen excluder, which is just a grate that the queen can't get through. As you can see, sort of some of the worker bees are able to maneuver through there. So the queen can't get above this to lay eggs. Yeah. Put that down here. And I've smoked these guys a little bit, so they're hopefully a little more docile. As I said, they're a little more lively. I think I like them a bit for that, but it also makes them challenging sometimes to get in here and really work with. So this is the newer box, and they, it looks like, are going through this like gangbusters as well. This hive has just had a really sort of filled. This again was the nuke that I got from Swan's Apiary up in Albion, Maine. Really difficult to see from the camera, I'm sure, but this is full of eggs, and we're actually only 2 frames in from the side. So the queen in this hive continues to just be incredibly active. And at one point, to try to slow this hive down, we moved a couple of frames over. I'm imagining that in the very near future, to give these guys enough space and to keep them from swarming, we're going to need to get some new boxes, and we're going to need to split them completely. And to do that, I'm going to want to make sure it's as simple as taking one box off of the other, making sure that there's a queen in one box and very, very young larvae or eggs in the other. And the bees will take over from there. They'll create their own queen from some of the cells that are left over there. And they do that by providing an egg or a young larva with what's called the royal jelly, which is the only difference really between the nutrition of a regular bee and the nutrition of what eventually becomes the queen. Great, we've got some full frames of brood here. So as you can see, these these bees are just continuing to fill up every bit of space that we are providing them. You can take a look in there. Again, there's cap brood, there's larvae. Actually, looks like larvae that is just hatched out of eggs. They're that young, as well as nectar sort of mixed in, but especially at the top of the frame there. In addition to all this eggs and brood, which is really excellent, these guys have been really good about filling up these brood frames with honey, which is really everything up here. This is capped honey. You can see that golden color up top is honey, which I'm guessing is going to be capped very soon. And again, I am just taken aback with how busy this queen is, sort of filling out these frames, which again means there's going to be just a really big upturn as far as our populations. These again are a box of frames that I just put on a couple of weeks ago, so I'm interested to see down in this box what they've done down there. Skip one here. As we get more towards the outside, you can kind of notice there's going to start to be more honey and nectar and less brood and larvae. This is almost completely covered with just those spots in the middle. And almost, if you can kind of imagine, in a hive there's almost a football shape of brood. So as you move further out into the frames, there's going to be sort of smaller and smaller areas And again, we have a frame with really nothing added to it yet, just a little bit of wax. And a frame where they've done a little bit more work, at least on this side, so they've got some room to expand. We're not in any danger yet of them starting to create a swarm. Which, if I haven't explained, a swarm would happen if and when these guys felt overcrowded, felt like they needed to sort of break off. They would create a new queen cell, like I said, by finding a young cell, feeding it the royal jelly, which lets the queen create sort of the full reproductive system to lay viable eggs. And when that queen hatched, the old queen would take, presumably about half of the hive, and they would go somewhere within a half mile. They would look around and try to find sort of the best place for them to create a new hive. The thing is that when the queen is out of the hive, essentially the other half that she takes with her sort of cling onto her to protect her. And if you've ever seen a swarm, it's really frightening looking. The bees at that point are not territorial because they don't have a home, and to a large extent are harmless. But tell that to somebody looking at it. And I'm gonna just shimmy this top box a little bit. Again, bees use propolis to try to lock down and make their hive airtight. And so, when they're good and active, that can make taking some of these boxes off challenging, as they're sort of glued together at that point. Alright, we want to make sure this doesn't tip, because they don't like that very much. And now we're into the bottom box, which I imagine is just chock full at this point. You can see there's pretty good wax frame here. There's some capped honey and some nectar. Nothing yet on the outside. And this is going to essentially run the course that all the others have. That as we move in more, there's going to be more brood. As we move towards the edges, the outside edges, there's going to be more honey. A little space and room to move, guys. All right. So again, this is mostly actually pollen. You can see some of the lighter yellows and oranges in there. Pollen is their protein source. Some capped honey again up here. And a great corner of capped honey and pollen on this side. These guys are pretty well stocked, which is, again, probably one of the reasons that they're doing so well and expanding their population so well. Now, I know I said these guys can be pretty testy, but they are tolerating me really well. Although, wow, have they glued crap out of that one. I'm gonna have a hard time getting this one up out, as they have very seriously glued that down. You'll notice, and this is from the nuke, that that the wax here is a lot darker. As the wax ages, when a bee is capped, it pupates, and just before it's officially born, it voids its bowels and then chews its way through the wax. Yet another reason we don't want brood frames creating honey. But as years and years go by, nurse bees will sort of clean that out, but just can't get every single bit, and the wax will darken. I think I see a guy chewing through. Welcome to the hive, buddy. Welcome to the hive. Fantastic. Lots of larvae. There's just every bit of this hive. It is just exploding with new bees, with brood, larvae, and eggs. So, work our way in a little bit. Wow, we have almost an entire frame of capped nectar and honey here. You can see the entire corners. This one less so, with just some brood in the middle. And again, as we work our way out, the brood goes more towards the middle in a football shape, and the sides become more packed with honey and nectar. I'm specifically interested on these next two frames. These are the new ones that I had added when I took the old frames out to put in the package hive. So I'm going to be seeing how full these are, being towards the middle. My hope would be that these are going to end up with a lot of brood. We've got some wax. All right. Not what I would have expected from these guys, but this is a much fuller frame of wax. I see brood on here, which is excellent. So they are starting to work on this, and oh wow, I wish you could see there's very new brood in here that looks like it's just come out of the egg. I see eggs on here. So this frame is going to start to fill out, I would think, rather quickly. And at this point, like I said, my queen in here is unmarked. I don't want to damage her. I didn't see her. So I am going to, I've gotten all the information I need. I don't want to take any extra risks that she may become damaged, so I'm going to put these guys spaced back together. And I'm going to close up the hive. We're going to look forward to spending some time out here next week. And again, we're going to treat these guys for what we call varroa mites, or varroa destructor, which probably sounds strange, but is like a tick for bees. And so they get onto the larva, they feed on the blood of the bees, and they leave them sort of exposed to to infection, all sorts of infection, viruses, funguses that the bees can usually fight off themselves, but are left sort of too sick to do so. Nice and easy on with this. And now this is the space on the other hive that I've been covering up. Which is not so much necessary on this one, as I'm using, oops, I almost forgot my honey. Super. All right. And largely this right here is to give a little bit of air circulation. I'm not having to cover it up so much because this is going to do that for me and make it a much lesser target for bees who are going to come in and try to rob the hive here. Wow, these guys tolerated me really well today. And we look forward to seeing you next week when we're going to treat both hives for varroa mites.